People experiencing Kundalini awakening often talk about the physical sensations. So maybe they experience tingling in the body, maybe they experience energy rushes, maybe sensations like water flowing through the body, maybe the body feels more like a liquid than a solid. There tends to be a general kind of concept of energy flowing through the body in a way that it wasn't before. When I first had my awakening, I had absolutely no context for what was happening to me. I think I had vaguely heard of Kundalini, but I felt it was related to Eastern traditions, which I wasn't practicing. So I was pretty lost in terms of trying to find answers to what I was going through. There was information about Kundalini, which I kind of rejected because that wasn't really me. I was a Christian at the time. And then there was kind of a lack of coherent information. I didn't know where to look for information. It seemed quite scarce. I think these days there is a lot of information out there, especially on the internet. But again, there's kind of the opposite problem of having too much information and maybe finding it difficult to know what to rely on and where to find relevant information. Quite often people have spontaneous awakenings, so they could have an experience of energy rushing through the body completely spontaneously, not through spiritual practices or through intent, but possibly through trauma or through a life event which has caused somehow this energy to awaken within them. Of course, there are people who awaken Kundalini intentionally as well, and that can range from people who've been doing maybe yoga for a long period of time, maybe over years and years, or a deep meditation practice. But then there's also people who have Shaktipat, which is a transmission of energy. They might actually go to a practitioner and receive a transmission of energy intentionally, but possibly without understanding the impact or the consequences of what they're going to have to work through when that happens. So Kundalini requires the body to be ready to receive and to process that energy. But when it's awakened, when the body is not ready, it essentially drives through the body and releases energy blockages, and which are caused by trauma, for example, or adverse life experiences. Could relate to past lives, it could relate to ancestral trauma. So all of these things which aren't in the conscious awareness are quite difficult to work with because the body experiences something which the mind doesn't know how to deal with. And this is the reason why a lot of people are quite cautious about Kundalini, and it's sometimes said to be dangerous. When it happened to me, I wish I had known firstly what it is. I didn't have a good knowledge of what Kundalini is, and I didn't know about other people's experiences. I had found a library book about Kundalini, but I read it way before this happened to me. So I'd read some kind of interesting, unusual stories about people awakening this energy within them from lots of different perspectives as well. Some spontaneous, some more controlled. But I wish I'd known really what it was and that it could happen to anybody. And I wish I'd had people to talk to, because often the experience that's had is very intense and it can be quite scary just talking about it, because firstly, most people don't understand. Secondly, it sounds very strange. And thirdly, it's just not something which people are going to be able to relate to generally and be able to give you good advice or guidance, or even just to be able to listen, hear your story without trying to provide a solution. I wish I'd known the importance of grounding. So I hadn't even heard of grounding. It is basically trying to bring your energy down into the lower chakras, and it can be done by spending time in nature, maybe gardening and really getting your hands into soil and into the earth. It can be by focusing on the ground, by connecting with trees, for example. Salt baths are said to be very grounding. The food you eat can be grounding, so maybe eating foods which grow in the earth can be helpful. And all of this connects you more to the earth and brings your energy down, makes you feel more present and able to connect with the physical world and go about your day-to-day life. I wish I'd known about the chakra system, so it wasn't something I'd heard about or knew about, but it's something which is very relevant to my life today, which enables me to kind of put things into perspective and understand where I might be imbalanced. It was completely new to me, so the idea that we have a root chakra, sacral chakra, etc., just never even knew about it. But after I had the awakening, it made complete sense because I could relate what I was going through to the chakra system and understand where I was imbalanced and what I needed to work on. And I've taken a very practical approach to healing, which is changing my external circumstances in order to feel better. So if I would identify an imbalance in my root chakra, for example, I would address that by looking at my environment or my external circumstances and see what I need to change there to bring everything back into balance. Another thing I really wish I'd known was that it's not about trying to get somewhere. I think initially I felt I was trying to work towards something and to achieve something, whereas the Kundalini awakening really isn't about that. It's about grounding. It's about bringing your experiences into the real life. It's about being present. It's not about trying to be the best at this or trying to be competitive or to prove how spiritual you are or how enlightened. In fact, that's probably going to set you back, because that's when you get into your ego. That goes against what Kundalini is working through the body to achieve, which is to make you connect with your true self, to be completely present, to be completely connected with your humanness, with your vulnerabilities, with your weaknesses, with your strengths, to integrate everything from your shadow. So working from the ego is not going to be helpful. So trying to be competitive, trying to see progress, trying to get somewhere is actually counterintuitive to the whole process. Some common misconceptions are that you need to practice a certain religion or have certain spiritual practices in order to awaken Kundalini. Of course, there are tried and tested routes to do this, which I'm not so familiar with because mine was spontaneous. But it's not only people that try to attain an awakening that experience it. There's many ways that people activate the energy and experience it, from having an accident to experiencing trauma to doing a multitude of spiritual practices to being very focused on the spiritual and less so on other aspects of life. It's not just through intense spiritual practice that this happens. There can be an assumption that it's linked to mental health, and whilst a Kundalini awakening can bring up mental health issues, anxiety, depression, dark night of the soul, trauma, whilst it can bring those up, it isn't a mental health issue in itself, so it just activates what is already present. So getting a diagnosis isn't necessarily going to be helpful, because the key is to allow this process to work through the body, whereas labeling it as maybe a mental health issue could actually get you stuck. So if you are labeled with suffering from anxiety and you start to refer to yourself as being somebody who's anxious, that actually could leave you kind of stuck in that state, rather than just seeing it as an energy that's moving through the body and needs to just be allowed to process in order to move through and allow you to be free from that. In terms of practical advice, I think it's extremely helpful to connect with people having some kind of similar experience. I've connected with a lot of people who talk about the energy that's activated. Our experiences are not necessarily similar in any way, but we have that common ground that we can talk about. Staying grounded is extremely important, so find ways to connect with the earth, to bring your energy down. Don't just focus on developing spiritual connection, but also finding ways to connect with the earth. Learn to listen to your body, so listen to what your body needs. You can actually just ask your body what it needs and wait for the reply. The body has an intelligence to it, which we're not really taught to be aware of. But if you feel you need something, you just try it. I mean, there's no harm in trying something, such as taking a salt bath or connecting with nature, and just see if it makes you feel better. And if it works, you can keep that practice up. So just a few words of encouragement for anyone going through this. I do believe it's a benevolent process. I do believe it can bring you back to your true nature in a very positive way. It can take many years to process. It can be a long journey. But I think if you can keep the hope that something positive is happening and there will be a good outcome to this, that will help you to get through. It's okay if it's messy. It's part of the process. If this resonates with you at all, if you've had a spiritual awakening, Kundalini awakening experience, and you have something to share, please post in the comments. And it would be really interesting to hear, what do you wish you had known before you had your Kundalini awakening? What information would have been helpful?